We are continuing to follow all breaking news developments as Operation Epic Fury now enters day 4. A live look there from Tel Aviv, Israel. As we've learned from the IDF, Hezbollah continues to launch strikes against Israel. And thank you for continuing to watch Live Now from Fox. I'm Stephanie Coueignoux. Just a little bit more about that breaking news right here. This is the social media post from Israel Defense Forces stating Hezbollah has continued to join Iran's terror campaign and has launched projectiles towards Israel. We do know that throughout the day, sirens have been sounding in Israel. Meantime, I also wanted to share this live look here from Beirut, Lebanon, and we continue to see plumes of smoke as Israel is responding to Hezbollah's strikes. We do see the smoke there rising in the distance. Meantime, we also are continuing to follow additional developments. This is from Fox News stating that earlier today, Israel targeted Iranian leadership meeting about its succession. That is according to a senior Israeli official talking to Trey Yingst. To speak more on this, I do want to bring in Blaise Misztal, the Vice President for Policy at JINSA. And Blaise, we appreciate you joining us once again here on Live Now from Fox.
Thanks for having me back, Stephanie.
So I do want to start off with the continuing coverage against the strikes between Israel and Hezbollah. The IDF just posting that Hezbollah has once again launched projectiles towards Israel. We're also continuing to see some of those strikes there live in Beirut, Lebanon at this hour. What can you share with us about these continuing developments?
Yeah, well, I think it's first and foremost important to understand not just what's happening right now between Israel and Hezbollah, but think back a year and a half ago in the midst of the post-10-7 war. Israel was fighting Hamas, but it was also under daily rocket and missile fire from Hezbollah, hundreds of those projectiles launched. And in fact, Hezbollah was considered to be one of the gravest threats to Israel. It had an arsenal that some thought was 150, 200, 300,000 rockets and missiles right there on Israel's border, able to darken the skies and rain destruction all over Israel. It was really Iran's main weapon in both attempting to deter Israeli attacks and punish any Israeli attacks directly on Iran. And what we saw happen just a year and a half ago in the fall of 2024 was Israel was able to go in and in a matter of weeks eliminate some 80 or 90% of those Hezbollah rockets that were threatening it. And so even though today Hezbollah is a threat, we see it still has weapons and munitions it can fire, not just at Israel. It's also fired at Cyprus. It's launched drones that have hit Cyprus. It's still a threat, but it is much less of one today than it was a year and a half ago. And that's really due to what Israel was able to do back in September of 2024. So first and foremost, big change in that threat posture from Hezbollah, and we have to be happy that we're just seeing a couple rockets here and there. But obviously that's still a danger. Obviously that's still unacceptable for Israel, still unacceptable for our partners like Cyprus that are being threatened by this Iranian terrorist group. And we've seen Israel start to go into Lebanon, hit some of those launchers, hit some of those drones and missile sites. And I think there's reporting now that they're also starting to send in some ground troops into southern Lebanon to try to secure some of those areas that have been Hezbollah strongholds that Hezbollah is firing from to really try to make sure that this terrorist group is degraded as much as possible.
And talking about some of these targeted strikes, so we're just getting this update here as well that I wanted to share. This is from the IDF stating that the IDF struck the covert compound in which the Iranian terror regime operated to develop necessary capabilities for nuclear weapons. In the site, a group of nuclear scientists operated covertly to develop a key component for nuclear weapons. The strike removes a key component in the Iranian regime's capability to develop nuclear weapons and joins a series of strikes conducted during Operation Rising Lion that were essential to eliminate the Iranian nuclear threat. Blaise, this coming just moments ago from the IDF. You know, we've been seeing the Israeli military and also its operatives really targeting, after months of surveillance. What can you share with us about this latest development?
Yeah, well, I think this just goes to show the nature of this Iranian regime, that it has continued to focus on trying to covertly build nuclear weapons capabilities, even after it's been sanctioned by President Trump's maximum pressure campaign, even after it was pounded last June by Israel and the United States, even as it's been under threat over the past couple of months by President Trump, even as President Trump was trying to negotiate a deal. We know that the Iranians have been working towards a nuclear weapons capability. And this was what triggered the war last June in the first place, is that Israeli intelligence and U.S. intelligence corroborated that they were trying to build maybe not a nuclear weapon itself, but they were trying to build some of the different pieces of it in separate compartmentalized programs so that they could say, we're not putting a nuclear weapon together, but we're doing research here, there's research over there. And if it came to it, they would be able to put it all together and assemble a nuclear weapon really quickly. As we're seeing from these releases from the Israelis, those activities continued. And that's just one of the reasons, in addition to its missile program and support for terrorism, that Iran was such a threat, and that the world will be safer after this war ends and the Islamic Republic is hopefully no more.
And I also wanted to talk about this that we learned about earlier today, the IDF announcing that it struck the Iranian leadership meeting as individuals were meeting together to elect to discuss the next supreme leader. How significant of a targeted mission was that?
It is an extremely significant one, perhaps more so for symbolism than anything else. There are conflicting messages from Iran about whether there was actually a meeting happening at this facility at the time that the strike happened, but it is the place where the Iranian regime would be meeting to elect the successor to Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, who was killed in the opening strike of this campaign. And it's critical for the legitimacy of the regime, for its ability to display that it is still functioning, that it has continuity, that it's going to be able to govern Iran. It's critical that this meeting happened, that it's able to say it followed its procedures and picked a new supreme leader. And the ability of Israel and the United States to have the intelligence, to have the precision, to stop that from happening is really another blow in the Islamic Republic's ability to function, and frankly, another nail in its coffin.
And Blaise, you were talking about the symbolism of this targeted operation. Do you think that it has any impact upon the selection of Iran's new supreme leader and perhaps, the mindset now of those who are trying to keep the regime in place?
Well, look, I don't think that anybody necessarily should be eager to have the job of supreme leader right now. Just like I don't think anyone in Iran has been eager to take any of the jobs of senior military commanders or nuclear scientists. They've been rather short-lived in their tenure, first in June and now in the current campaign. I don't think necessarily that whatever was happening in the headquarters of the Assembly of Experts was critical to choosing the successor. That decision is probably made by a much smaller group of people. But it is extremely important to the symbolism of the Islamic Republic functioning, going through the steps of its process. It's sort of like we would have the swearing in of a new president. If they don't put their hand on that Bible and they don't take the oath of office, have they actually become president? Without that symbolism, without taking those steps, the Islamic Republic is going to struggle to say that it's actually functioning, that it can continue to rule the country. And that is both bad for the regime and its ability to project power, but it's good for the Iranian people who are looking for symbols and signals that this regime is crumbling and that their destiny is theirs to take into their own hands.
And Blaise, I just also wanted to share this with our viewers right here. This is from the U.S. Central Command, posted just moments ago, stating that the Iranian regime's killer drones have been a menace in the Middle East for years. These drones are no longer a tolerable risk. And we actually have some video to share with our viewers. This is some unclassified video that the U.S. Central Command has shared as we take a look at these ongoing targeted strikes. And we were hearing from President Trump yesterday stating that he says that this operation could go on between 4 to 5 weeks, but possibly even longer. You know, has Israel indicated any sort of timeline on its end?
They have not, and I think it's probably too early to put a timeline on this. You know, I think the right thing to do is focus on the objectives, and the objectives have been clearly stated by the United States and Israel, which is to eliminate Iran's ability to be a threat to its own people and to its neighbors and the rest of the world. That means eliminating Iran's nuclear program, eliminating its ballistic missile program, eliminating its drones that we're seeing there, and eliminating its support for terrorism. And I think the good news is that is happening at a very rapid pace. You know, we have hundreds, if not thousands, of airstrikes having been conducted over the last 3 days, and we're seeing the results. You know, here at JINSA, we're tracking every missile, every drone that Iran launches. We've seen those missile launches drop 95% since Saturday because of what the United States and Israel are doing to find and eliminate those missiles and those launchers that are putting them up in the air. That degradation of Iranian capabilities is happening very quickly. There's going to be other objectives for the U.S. and Israel to pursue, but hopefully that major threat of the missiles and drones is going to go down very, very quickly here soon.
And Blaise, I also wanted to share this here as well. This is from the United States, you know, cautioning individuals in these following countries, including Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza. Israel, you know, unfortunately, no stranger to, you know, attacks. But what is the sense in Israel as people, you know, continue to be encouraged to, you know, shelter in place and also be near shelters as we continue to see these attacks on Israel?
Yeah, look, it's obviously a major disruptor of daily life, particularly the way that Iran has chosen to launch its missiles. It's not only launching at civilian areas, but it's launching small numbers of missiles regularly throughout the day or irregularly throughout the day. It's not launching one big salvo every night when people are asleep. It's easy to be in your shelter. They're launching them repeatedly throughout the day, so people are constantly having to run in and out of shelters, interrupting daily life. That obviously has a psychological toll, but the people of Israel are also well accustomed to this. They went through 2 years of war just recently, and they know that this is being done to make a safer Israel, a safer Middle East, but also a safer United States. And so I think that is a risk that they are bearing very bravely.
Blaise, we're now in day 4 of Operation Epic Fury. What is so far the biggest takeaway that you've seen?
Look, I think the biggest takeaway is really how weak the Islamic Republic is, and how quickly the United States and Israel were able to dominate it, establish air superiority. It's obviously a wounded tiger. It is still dangerous. But I remember back in last June during Israel's Operation Rising Lion, before the United States launched Midnight Hammer, and now in the lead up to this war, there's been a lot of discussion in Washington that attacking Iran is going to unleash World War III, that somehow this country was going to be a worthy adversary to the United States military, the finest fighting force the earth has ever seen. And I think that's clearly proven to be false. That's not to say that there are not risks. There have been casualties. Unfortunately, I'm sure there will be more. But I think it's really incredible what this combination of intelligence, precise air power, and other exquisite capabilities that only the United States and Israel have has done to bring what was once the dominant power in the Middle East to heal so quickly.
Blaise, before we let you go, any final thoughts that you would want to share with our viewers?
I think it's really important to watch what happens next, not just in the U.S. and Israeli military operations, but inside Iran itself. President Trump, Prime Minister Netanyahu have been saying since this conflict started that they are creating an opportunity for the Iranian people to take their destiny into their own hands. And we're starting to see that happen, at least so far, on the peripheries of Iran, particularly in the west and the Kurdish areas, somewhat in the southeast, in the areas where there's a Baluch minority. People are rising up. They're fighting back against the Iranian security forces. They're taking over police stations, releasing prisoners. And I think watching that momentum build over the next couple of days is something I'm going to be paying attention to.
Blaise, as always, we appreciate you joining us here on Live Now from Fox.
Thanks for having me, Stephanie.